If you're interested in any Safari Ltd products, make sure to visit safariltd.com or amazon.com/Safari Ltd. And don't forget to use discount code BIONIC to get 15% off of your order. Hello and welcome to the review for the Safari Ltd 2021 Daspletosaurus. This figure isn't even out yet and hasn't even been revealed yet at the time of filming this video. Safari sent this over to me early. First time that's happened since summer of 2018 when they sent me the Camarasaurus and Prestosuchus. So pretty freaking awesome. A huge thank you to Safari for sending this figure over to be reviewed and such on the channel. And it's a fantastic model. I'm so glad to add it to the collection. I wasn't sure what to expect, you know, because I had no idea what they were really sending me. I had already seen this figure because they also sent it to Spino Dude, and I saw some pictures of it from him first. But nonetheless, getting it in person, pulling out of the box was really exciting. This is one of my favorite theropod figures from Safari in a couple of years, I think, so let's get right into it. First of all, the color palette. The colors on this figure are simple, but just look really pleasing to me. As you can see, it pretty much just alternates between this kind of yellow-orange color on the bottom and this desaturated dark green on the top, with some little stripes and other patterns to kind of break up the look of it. You can also see there's some nice blending with the yellow parts of the animal. It's sort of a more pale yellow down on the bottom of the tail and on the underside of the creature. But then on the flanks and the thighs, you can see a more saturated orange sort of being blended in there, and that looks really, really nice in my opinion. This color scheme is also interesting because it is almost, this figure has almost the exact same color palette as the old Safari Ltd Field Museum Sioux Tyrannosaurus figures. The Field Museum line was like a really weird, they're all rarities, like old discontinued figures now, because it was a really short-lived series from Safari. And there was a Torosaurus, I think, and then I have the Anatotitan and/or Edmontosaurus from the line. And I used to have one of the Tyrannosaurs. I believe it was the closed mouth variant, but it broke or got lost at some point. I had it when I was a kid. I haven't seen it in years, but anyhow, this figure has like basically the same colors as those T-Rex figures, which is kind of interesting. It makes me wonder if it's an intentional nod or just coincidence. Either way, just kind of a cool detail to note. Speaking of detail, let's zoom in and take a look at that plastic flesh, those plastic scales. The scalation and detail work on this figure is pretty darn great, if my camera will function like a camera. There we go. The detail on most of the body is very similar to my favorite theropod from this year's lineup of figures, the 2020 lineup, that of course being the Chiansaurus. That figure had very small, smooth, rounded little scales, and this figure has very similar scales across much of the body, but not quite the same. You can see that there are some small clusters of sort of larger scales in there breaking up the pattern, and I really like that. It really brings it to life and just adds a nice extra level of nuance to the skin texturing. And if we move on to the face, you can see that the scales get much larger here, and the nasal ridge and the crests over the eyes are capped off with some very large sort of scoots and chunks of keratin. We have direct evidence that at least Daspletosaurus horneri, one of the two known species of Daspletosaurus, had very large, like, keratinous growths all over its head and some extensive, like, crests and things like that. So cool to see that the sculptor took inspiration and rendered all of that stuff really well on this head sculpt. And yeah, in general, I just really, really like the fact that there's a bit more variance than usual in terms of the size and shape of the scales. It really helps to bring the creature to life a little bit. It doesn't look as artificial or as monotonous as if it had just like one size of scale across the whole body. Another cool accuracy detail is that this is the first Safari theropod figure, to my knowledge, that doesn't have those like signature raptorial bird scoots on the feet. It just has like smooth like digits, and same with the hands as well, with just normal small scales. Those signature large scoots on the toes of raptorial birds, or I guess all birds pretty much, are actually like devolved feathers. So it doesn't really make any sense that dinosaurs would have those as well, but it's such a common trope to put those types of scoots and scales on their feet and their fingers. And so it's really cool to see that this figure actually totally avoids that. Interestingly enough, this is like the only Safari figure I've ever seen where the interior of the mouth, with the teeth and the gums and tongue and all that, appears to be a separate piece that's actually been like inserted into the head. I don't know why they did that. It doesn't really make much of a difference to how the figure looks, just kind of an interesting detail to note. Another cool accuracy thing, this is one of only 2 Safari theropods to my knowledge. There's probably others I'm forgetting, but this and the feathered Tyrannosaurus from 2017 are the only 2 I can think of that actually have nasal openings in the roof of the mouth. And that is so cool. That's a detail that, 90% of dinosaur figures completely miss. So really nice to see that included. The pose on this model, the overall posture and silhouette is really pleasing to me. There's one little awkward aspect to it, which is just kind of how the tail and the hips are relatively horizontal, and then the back somewhat awkwardly starts to tilt up. The spine looks maybe slightly contorted, but that's pretty minor. And the overall look of this animal, just in this dynamic walking pose, rearing up a bit and roaring off very ferociously, just looks great. Reminds me of some old Carnegie figures. A lot of times Carnegie theropods would be put in these very impressive sort of stances, roaring off into the distance at something or other, and I've heard people even call it like the Carnegie King of the World pose, because it was such a trope. And this figure kind of reminds me of that, and overall the pose of the animal just looks really, really nice. Looks good from both sides as well. Don't fall over. This figure is also very stable. Like, I was just worrying about it falling over there because I quickly turned it and it wobbled a bit. But overall, it stands really, really well. So that's another great positive to this one. In terms of accuracy, I already talked about a few accuracy details, but overall, it's worth mentioning that this figure is just a really accurate reconstruction of the genus of Daspletosaurus. The only real critiques I can bring up are that I think the forearms are a bit long. I think the hands are the right size and the biceps are the right size, but I think the forearm should just be shortened up a bit. And then the other thing is that the head sculpt is not perfect. There's something about the shape. It almost looks like the snout's a little too elongated, and the nasal ridge is a bit too convex. At least based off of the skull material that I've looked at for Daspletosaurus, they tend to have, like many tyrannosaurs, a bit of a concave swoop down from the post-orbital crests down to the tip of the nasal ridge. And so the fact that it's so convex and so tall along here is a bit odd, but I also get that this figure is clearly reconstructing the head of this animal being at least partially covered in keratin. And so that could definitely change the shape. I still wish it was a little less convex and had a little bit more of that sort of concave swoop to the nasal ridge that the actual skull does, but a little bit of distortion to the original skull shape is not really too big of a deal. And overall, this is still a really good, very identifiably Daspletosaurus looking head sculpt. I do also think that there's a bit of an odd asymmetry, the other side of the head just doesn't look as good to me. I can't really explain why. Maybe some of you will agree, some of you probably won't, because it might just be a random subjective thing. But there's something about this side of the head that just doesn't look nearly as, distinctly tyrannosaurid. I don't know. Ooh, I do like the eyes as well. They have kind of a teal or cyan color to them. Looks pretty nice. All right, so that is about it. I pretty much only have positives for this figure. It looks really, really good. Ooh, one thing I forgot to mention. This figure does not have lips, really. I guess it sort of does, but the lips are not completely covering up the teeth. Last year's Tyrannosaurus had an issue where the lips were so prominent and the teeth were so small that the teeth were invisible from some angles and there were just little nubs in the lower jaw. And this figure totally doesn't have that. It has very crisp, nicely sculpted teeth. So that's a positive change from last year's theropods. For a quick size comparison, I'm actually going to bring in not only the Safari Utyrannus, but also the Chiansaurus, which I referenced earlier several times. And I also referenced this earlier, the feathered Tyrannosaurus. There we go. So there's the whole Tyrannosaur family from Safari right now, not counting weird oddities like the old Guanlong or some of the previous versions of T-Rex. We're just gonna ignore that. This is the proper, modern, really nice looking Tyrannosaur family from Safari. The Daspletosaurus looks right at home with its taxonomic brethren and is overall just a great addition to the Safari model range. I'm gonna be giving this one a 9.5 out of 10. I dig it a lot, and I look forward to seeing what else Safari has in store for 2021. So again, huge thanks to Safari for sending this one over early. This was a super cool unboxing and review. I didn't film the unboxing, it was just fun. But I enjoyed it all by myself, and you will just have to imagine it. Again, if you would like to purchase this figure, you will soon be able to do so at SafariLtd.com or at Amazon.com/SafariLtd. And as always, whatever you order from any of those sites, you can always use coupon code BIONIC to get 15% off of your order, unless you've already used it. In which case, good on you for doing that. And if you haven't, then join the already used the code club. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'm gonna stop talking because that's just clearly what needs to happen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.